Hello, this is Michel Leviathan Sorbet and you are watching a new episode on the Wojennik TV YouTube channel. Today I would like to invite you to watch a new review, of a game that I have already showed you a few times on my channel. Now this is a game which was republished in 2019 thanks to a successful Kickstarter campaign, and the game is called HEXplore, The Valley of the Dead King. Now, as I said, I have already showed you, I have already reviewed HEXplore, The Valley of the Dead King a few years back, because the game was initially published in 2017, but since then the game has been relaunched thanks to another successful Kickstarter campaign, which was focused on the second opus in this HEXplore system, The Forests of Adrimon. Alongside this second game, the first one was refreshed and it was published once more. So today a review of the second edition of HEXplore, The Valley of the Dead King. The differences between the first and the second edition were the subject of another material which I have already showed you. You can look at this video by checking our other materials. Now today about HEXplore, The Valley of the Dead King. The game is meant to be played in a group of 2 to 6 people, but it's absolutely possible to play it also solo. The time of play of this title is about 3 to 4 hours. It all depends on the way that the story evolves. The game is for people from 13-14 years up. It was published, of course, by Mariucci J Designs, and its author is Jonathan Mariucci. Now, today I would like to show you how this game looks, what are its components, then how the game works, and finally I would like to give you my opinion about this title. I have already done it a few times, but now I would like to focus on the second edition of the core game. So let's start with a look at the components. At first, let's take a look at all the magnificent components enclosed in the box of HEXplore, The Valley of the Dead King. Now here is a setup game for 2 players. As you can see, one of the most important elements of this game are playing tiles, and we receive a few of them in the core box. Each tile, as you can see, has some terrain features. It enables it to be placed in such a way that a fantasy world is being created. Now this is the basic setup composed of 4 big tiles, but apart from those tiles we also receive additional tiles which then during gameplay can be discovered and added to the world. So this initial setup is just a part of the world. You can arrange this world just as you want it, and additionally during gameplay you will be able to explore additional tiles. Now we receive also small tiles apart from the big ones that I have already shown you. We receive also smaller tiles, and those are, for instance, tiles of such a shape which also can be added to the world created during gameplay. So the number of possibilities, the number of possible worlds in which our adventure will take place is quite high. What can we find on those hexes? So there are some major terrain features which will be crucial during gameplay, and those will be cities numbered from 1 to 6, where the 6 is just a hex. Then also boss locations. Those will be the places where the major opponents will be located, where we will have to travel in order to defeat them. Those small markers are quest markers, indicating that in such a hex there is a quest to be accomplished. Now as you can see, we also have roads, we have rivers, we have some sea or lake, we have some mountains, including high mountain peaks which are inaccessible unless we do have some special equipment. On additional terrain tiles, we will have additional terrain features such as shrines, such as ruins, etc. So there is quite a lot to discover in this HEXplore world. We receive also 2 miniatures which will be moving on through those hexes. The first one is the miniature representing our group, our heroes. And unless unlike in many other games, we receive only 1 miniature for the entire group, even if we play, for instance, a 6 players game. Each player will not have his own miniature. I believe it's fine, it's well associated to the mechanics and to the way that the game has been designed. It would be a waste of time, a waste of money to include additional miniatures, because the group travels together. We cannot split during gameplay. So additional miniatures would not be functional because they wouldn't stack on the board. The second miniature that we receive in this core box is the miniature of the Dead King himself. As you can see, very nicely done, very invocative, and it really looks great when placed on the board. Now the Dead King starts the game not on the board, he will enter the board during gameplay, but I will talk about it a little bit later. Apart from those elements, HEXplore is also a game in which we will find a huge amount of different cards. And the first type of cards that we will use during gameplay are circumstance cards. Circumstance cards will be adventures, will be enemies, will be some afflictions or events that we will encounter during our journey. And each and every turn we will have a set of circumstance cards, and those will be the cards that our group can run into. As you can see, there are always 5 face-up circumstance cards, and additionally we have the circumstance deck, from which we will be randomly drawing additional cards if the text of the cards says so, or if we obtain a hex on our 6-sided die during the circumstance phase. The second type of cards used in HEXplore are quest cards, and those will be the missions, the additional things that our group will have to accomplish in order to obtain some benefits. Those benefits can be, for instance, gold, food, additional cards enabling us to pump up our statistics. Each quest card has a specific location indicating on which tile we should place the quest token, and also where we should travel in order to accomplish such a quest. Each card also explains how to accomplish this quest and states what are the benefits or the prizes that we receive after accomplishing such a quest. The third type of cards are power-up cards, and those are cards which will enable our heroes to pump up their statistics. Each such a card shows an information about a different ability or skill which we can upgrade while obtaining these power-up cards. Now those cards are acquired when defeating bosses, when defeating monsters, and while accomplishing quests. A major and very important element in this game are the hero boards, hero cards, because during gameplay and during the setup of the game, each player will create his own character. This character will be composed of 2 elements, of a role card and of a race card. Now the roles are very different. We receive many different characters, for instance the necromancer, but we can choose or randomly choose from a great pool. For instance, we can receive a nomad character, we can receive a weaponsmith, we can receive a priest, etc. Each of those characters also has his own picture, so we can see how we would look like in the game. Now those role or character boards have, for first of all, the information concerning the different parameters of such a role, because each character will have certain abilities, certain skills, and certain vital parameters. The two vital parameters will be our health and our energy. The three skills will be the navigation skill, exploration and survival skill, and then the abilities will be the attack, defend and use item, first mastery and second mastery abilities. As you can see on the board, we will be writing some information. Each parameter, each skill can be upgraded or sometimes can decrease. And while this happens, we will be using a dry erase marker in order to write the current parameter, the current number of our skill. We also have some space to write our own name, to include information about our favorite opponent, which will be the type of creature which we are especially efficient during fight with. Then we will also have a space to write down our equipment, to track our food rations, to track our amount of gold, and finally we have also the center space of this board where we have our special abilities described. Those abilities are at most times two additional abilities which are associated to our masteries, because each character will have a first and a second mastery, which will, each time we use them, require us to use our energy. So all those parameters are connected one to another, because some masteries, for instance, will require us to sum our attack parameters and our first mastery parameters, etc. Each time it is well described on this card. But this card is not all, because creating our character requires us also to draw or to choose, to randomly choose or to choose another card, a race card. We also have a huge amount of race cards, for instance, goblins, demon-borns, angels, etc. And each such a card will show us, first of all, our favorite opponent, which we will write later on our board, and information about our parameters, about our statistics. Additionally, our food rating. This is a number telling us how much food we have to consume each turn. And finally, an additional capability, an additional capacity, which we will be using during gameplay. As you can see, those parameters written on the race cards are just modifiers, because we start the game with a certain amount of points associated to each ability or skill, but this initial number can be firstly increased by our race card, and secondly it can be increased through upgrading our gear, because at the game start we will have a certain amount of gold which we can invest in order to buy some equipment or in order to increase our parameters. Each time we want to increase our parameter through this way, we have to check the first non-used place on associated to this skill, and this is the amount of gold that we have to pay in order to increase our skill. So in this case, the necromancer would have to pay 5 units of gold in order to increase his defense skill from 2 to 3. If we did so, this would be this part would be covered through thanks to the dry erase marker, and an additional upgrade would cost us 6. Apart from those cards, we also receive some other material which will be used during gameplay, and those will be dice of 4 different colors. first of all, green, blue and yellow dice associated to our skills, which will require us to make some tests, and a fourth type of die, a six-sided die used to, for instance, check for the circumstance that we will have to resolve or other random events. We receive some markers which will be used, for instance, to track the movement of the dead king, which will be used to track quests or other information. We receive also additional player aids, which will be, for instance, used to indicate the equipment available on the market, the equipment available on the special Bezel Quarks black market, which is accessible after defeating a boss, the things that can happen in runes, in shrines, an explanation of the game turn, etc. An important element is also the battle mat, on which we will write each time information concerning our opponent and about our party, about the damage that we can inflict to our opponent. So here we can also include information about the dead king movement speed, information about blessings, information about escorted persons, and also we receive information about how to additionally change the difficulty level of a game. So how will the statistics, how will the parameters of each opponent change according to the chosen level of difficulty. What we also receive are bosses or opponents cards, and those will be the big creatures that we will encounter in their lairs, and we will try to defeat them. As you can see, each of them has his own card with information about their health, about their energy and about their special attacks. Also with some huge rewards sometimes for being able to defeat such an opponent. Additionally, of course, we receive also the Dead King tile, so the supreme boss, which we will try to slay during gameplay in order to preserve peace in the valley where the Dead King lurks. As you can see, a huge amount of health, some terrifying capabilities, of course no rewards, because the reward is simply winning the game. Fantastic artwork. Finally, we receive also two booklets. The first one is a rule book written in color, which explains us, first of all, how we use different things found in the game box, how we set up the game, how a game turn is being played, how we increase our skills, etc., etc. It shows also how to resolve combat, how to read some keywords included on cards, how also to rearrange our game or to alter it using optional rules, optional setup. The second booklet, which was absent in the first edition, which is a novelty when it comes to the second edition of the Valley of the Dead King, is the storybook. Now this is a fantastic edition because it has descriptions concerning, for instance, alternative start possibilities. It describes all the game locations found on the board. It describes the major items, events, discoveries. So it adds really a narrative depth to the game. We can also read about some opponents, of course also about the history of Bezel Quark or the Living Storm, etc. So we receive also some short stories. Very nice addition because it's important, especially to players who like this role-playing aspect of an adventure game. It helps to really augment the climate of HEXplore. Now those are pretty much all the components used during a game of HEXplore. Now I would like to explain briefly how a game turn of HEXplore works. The objective of HEXplore, the Valley of the Dead King, is to destroy, to kill the Dead King himself. As I said earlier, the Dead King does not start the game on the board. He will enter it during one of the first turns. Until the final fight with the dead king, players will just play their turns, and they will play them according to the game turn sequence. So how such a turn looks like? First of all, players have the possibility to move their adventurers, their miniature, because they, as I said earlier, will travel as a group. In order to move, the players will have to choose one of four different types of movement. The first one is camping, and camping is a useful way to restore health because it enables each and every player to retrieve 3 units of health and energy. Additionally, the tests that they will do during the second phase of the turn, the skill tests, will be much easier. The second type of movement is cautious movement, which means that the group will move only 1 hex in any direction, or that the group moves at normal speed but alongside a river or alongside a road. So this is cautious movement, and by doing so, the players obtain an additional benefit. They will have the opportunity to avoid any circumstance that they run into during the same turn. The third type of movement is normal movement, and at most times this means that the heroes will be able to move their adventurer 4 hexes in any direction. So here we do not look at rivers, we do not look at roads, we can just move 4 hexes away. Moving so is much faster, but it also means that the players will have to fight, or will have to resolve the circumstance card for this turn. The fourth and final type of movement is reckless movement. As you might expect, it's a very fast movement because it enables to move even faster than during normal movement, but also it unfortunately causes energy drains to all players. So that's not a thing you would like to do every turn. After movement, we verify if our adventurer ended its movement somewhere on a special space. Special spaces, special places are cities, are shrines, bosses, ruins, and quest locations. But before resolving such places, if we happen to finish our movement on such a space, each player will have to roll their dice in order to do some checks. Each hero will have to roll their skill dice separately, and those rolls will be compared to the skills on each player's game mat. So after throwing the dice, we compare the results to the 3 skills: navigate, explore, and survival. In order to pass a test, a player has to obtain a number equal or smaller than the skill. What happens if a test is failed? Well, if a navigation test is failed by more than half of the group wanders. It means that the group lost somewhere their path, and they have to be displaced 1 hex into a random direction. Of course, if the group moved cautiously, this won't happen because the navigation test is automatically successful. If they, however, manage to roll smaller or equal to the navigation roll, the group is okay. The second test concerns exploration. Here it is possible to obtain some gold, and if the test succeeds, an explorer finds 2 units of gold. A failed test means nothing serious. Then the third test concerns survival. As I mentioned earlier, each adventurer will have a certain food rating, indicating the number of food rations that units that this adventurer will have to consume each turn in order to survive, in order to function normally. If this test is successful, so for instance, if I rolled a 3, that would mean that I have found some food somewhere along my journey. I do not have to consume what I am carrying in my backpack. But if I fail such a test, I have to consume food from my rations. So for instance, if I have a food rating of 2 and if I fail my test, rolling for instance a 7, I have to erase 2 food units, because I have to eat. Now, eating is important because it enables your adventurer to act normally. If you happen to fail your test while you do not have any food left, you start starving. And starvation is bad, because starvation can, even if it endures for several turns, cause your death. So you should always have some food with you in case you failed your survival test. Now, there is also a possibility that a player rolls 3 hexes, which means critical success, because hex is the best possible result. If you happen to roll 3 hexes on your skill dice, you will immediately obtain a bonus card, a power-up card, which you can immediately apply in order to increase one of your skills or abilities or vitals indicated by the card. So that's an extremely good situation, but of course extremely unlikely, because you have to roll 3 hexes on each of your 3 dice. After testing those parameters by each player, we verify the circumstance deck. Now, the circumstance cards are verified if you do not end the movement on a place such as a city, a shrine, boss rune, or quest. If you end the movement during the turn somewhere else, you have to take a closer look at the circumstance cards. Now, there are always 5 circumstance cards face up, and there is always also the deck of circumstance cards. You roll a die, the 6-sided die, to randomly choose the circumstance that you will have to resolve during this turn. And those circumstances, as I explained earlier, can be of different types. You can find some useful items. You can run into traps. You can experience events. You can also run into some enemies, for instance, such as will-o-wisps. Now, if you moved cautiously, after rolling the die, you can decide to discard the circumstance. So that's a fine thing, because if the circumstance is something positive, you can still grab it. If it's something negative and you think you will have some troubles defeating it, you can discard it. So that's a real advantage of moving cautiously. But sometimes you will have to move quickly. You will have to get to somewhere rapidly, and then you can run into trouble. So if you happen to run into an enemy, what happens next? You have to fight such an enemy. And fighting in HEXplore is really simple, because each player, each character will, during each round of combat, choose one of their actions. He will always have the possibility to attack or to defend, deciding to reduce the damage that inflicts your opponent. He will also have the opportunity to use one of his masteries, because each character has some abilities which can, for instance, upgrade over allies' strength or attacking directly your opponent. So each time, each player will have to decide what to do during their turn. After deciding so, we make a sum of the attack strength, the final attack strength of the heroes, and we will compare it to the health of the opponent. If we manage to score more hits than the endurance of such an opponent, we can destroy him. But this opponent also attacks us, and to verify what type of attacks what type of attack this unit will launch, we roll a die and verify the result. Here it's a hex, so the most dangerous type of attack. So Will-O-Wisp will activate their ability on the bottom of this card. Now, if the heroes run into trouble, if we happen to run into a really powerful enemy and we believe that we cannot win, there is still possibility of fleeing. If you try to flee, you do have to succeed in a survival skill roll. If you do not succeed, you have to retry it with an additional positive modifier during the next round of combat. When the battle ends, if you succeed in defeating the enemy, you can also retrieve the rewards. Rewards can be gold, food, sometimes even power-up cards or additional items. After resolving the circumstance cards, the next phase is directly the Dead King phase. But there is also a possibility that the circumstance phase is skipped. This situation occurs when our movement ends on one of the special locations. So if we end our movement, for instance, in a city, we can take city actions, we can heal ourselves, we can upgrade our gear, we can buy potions at the market, etc., etc. We can also turn in quests, because earlier, if we end our movement on a quest location, we can try to accomplish one of the quests which are face up at the bottom of the board. Of course, in order to accomplish such a quest, first of all, we have to visit the place where the quest is being located. Secondly, we have to accomplish the things written on the quest cards. Accomplished quests can be turned in cities and also in shrines, and each quest grants some benefits to the group, for instance, additional power-up cards. Visiting boss locations will enable us to fight those bosses. Visiting shrines will enable us to verify what we have found in such a shrine. The same concerns ruins. So if we visit such a special place, we skip the circumstance phase for the turn and we concentrate on the event. The last phase during a game turn is the Dead King phase. And during this phase, the Dead King will manifest his power. He will try to destroy one of the cities on the board. Before game begins, the Dead King is absent from the board, so during the first few turns, we will just verify if the Dead King appears. We roll the die, and if we roll a hex, the Dead King appears on turn 1. If he doesn't, then we re-roll this die during the second turn, and now it's a 5 or 6, a 5 or hex, then it's a 4-5 hex, etc. So the Dead King will finally appear. When he appears, we roll the die once more to verify which city he has taken, because the Dead King immediately manages to turn one of the cities into a death desert. So the Dead King will manifest himself in one of those cities, changing it into a fallen city, and during the next turn he will begin his movement on the board, choosing randomly as a target another of the cities. Here the city number 5 will be where we will put the Dead King marker, and the Dead King will begin during the next turn his movement to this city in order to destroy it and to place there a fallen city marker, as in the first case. The speed of the movement of the Dead King is 1 plus each fallen city. So at the beginning, because we have one fallen city, his speed will be of 2 hexes. Later it can be a lot faster. If the heroes happen to be on the path of the March of the Dead King, a battle will take place, but you should avoid it at the beginning, because the first turns until the Dead King really takes control of the majority of the cities is to the objective is to rather augment our abilities, our skills, to prepare ourselves to this final battle. We can try to free a fallen city if we happen to have a talisman found somewhere in the shrines, but it is not an easy thing to do. Of course, it is sometimes beneficiary because it will help us to gain some time. But finally, the sole objective is to destroy the Dead King. So a final battle is inevitable, and here the struggle between the two sides will finally happen. That's it when it comes to the very basic mechanisms of HEXplore the Valley of the Dead King. I would like now to pass to a summary, and I would like to give my opinion about this game, to talk about its stronger and a little bit weaker points. HEXplore the Valley of the Dead King is a game that I have really often played since the first edition was published, and it is a game that I really liked. So I was eager to try the second edition in order to check what things are different and how the game looks refreshed after the second Kickstarter campaign. So while giving my opinion about this game, I would like to repeat some of the things that I have already told about the Valley of the Dead King. At first, the components and the quality of the things that are enclosed in the box. This is just top notch. The game had been published with such great elements that it's so pleasant to look at them. I really love the way that some things had been redone in the second edition, especially the map tiles, because the first edition was a little bleak in this sector. In the second edition, those tiles are truly magnificent, and if I had to choose if I wanted to play the game using the maps from the first or from the second edition, I would choose the second. It's a little bit darker, the tiles are prettier, and I like the theme, I like the colors chosen in the second edition. So I believe it is a step forward. Having said that, looking at all the other elements and close the box, we really cannot complain. We receive such a high quantity of such high quality elements that it's just pleasant to look at them. Having bought this game, we shouldn't have absolutely any doubts that we have acquired a game full of great components. The second thing is what I think the major strong point of the HEXplore system and from Return of the Valley of the Dead King itself. It's a game in which we receive a huge quantity of different character possibilities, of different character mixes. We are creating our character of two different elements, of our character and of our race. Mixing those two elements enables us to receive really a great diversity of possibilities. We can be a goblin berserker, we can be an elf wanderer, etc. We receive such a number of different characters and races that it's just very large. The second thing is also that while the quantity of those characters and races is big, they also very differ one from another. I have seen some games which offer a lot of characters, but those characters very often are different one from another only because sometimes one parameter is different than the other. Here it's not the case. Not only the races have different modifiers, they also have special capabilities. The characters have such a great number of different parameters and of special capabilities that each and every character will be very much different from the others. What I really like is also the fact that directly on the character boards you receive the information if your character is a striker, is it a support, because it enables beginners, people who play HEXplore for the first time, to have a quick glance at what are its strong points of this character. We know if such character should strike your enemies, if it should be in the front line, or maybe if it should, for instance, help your other teammates by staying a step backwards but helping them throwing some spells or using his capabilities. So that's a great thing that such differentiation had been made. What I really like is the fact that you can play HEXplore in a few different ways. What differs the first edition from the second is the fact that you no longer have the possibility of playing the Dead King. The elements of the Dead King had been transferred to the box with the expansion, which I will be showing to you shortly. But we still have some different ways of playing HEXplore in this core game. So we have the marathon variant, we have the power-up variant, we have many others which enable us to tailor the game according to our preferences, and that's really good. Not to mention that it is a game totally playable solitaire. I very much like games, solo games, games with solitaire modes, and I enjoyed playing HEXplore solo a lot. I loved playing with one character, I loved playing with two characters, using different variants, and I was each time very satisfied with the effect. I haven't won very often, it happened, but it wasn't very easy, but I always had a great time, and I believe that having great time at a game is the purpose of playing. It's what the game had been created for. What I like also is the fact that we receive a really great mix of adventures, of quests, of circumstance cards. Each time we will be playing a different adventure. Firstly, you will grab a character and a race which probably will be different from the ones that you had already used. Secondly, you will differently attribute some initial power-ups. Then you will begin moving in a different direction than you did earlier. Finally, you will grab different quests, you will grab different circumstance cards. The Dead King will target another city. Each and every game will be different, and that is a major positive point of HEXplore and of the Valley of the Dead King. I like the fighting rules, I like the combat rules, because they are pretty simple. It's not a very complicated system. It might seem so, because looking at the character board you may think, oh my god, yeah, I have so many things to read, it's a difficult game. It's a very simple game to be played. All the mystery, all the complicated things, as you might think, are very simple, because you just have to read a card and the card says you all what you have to do. While in combat you just have to choose your action. You have only a few of them. Of course, the decision what action to choose is critical, is very important. If you attack, if you defend, if you use an item, if you use your first, second mastery, is all part of the game. It's all part of the decision making. And each time, while playing with your group, you will have to carefully discuss, you will have to carefully choose which action to play, which action to choose by each of your group members. Because while facing some more and more difficult opponents, the bosses, finally the Dead King, cooperation will be absolutely crucial and critical. I know some adventure games where at some point where you develop your character, when you become very strong, you just destroy every opponent that you happen to cross by just declaring the sole and only action of attack. I attack, I take 5 points of damage, I don't care, I have an endurance of 50. It doesn't work so in HEXplore, and I think it's very well thought in the system. The core of the system is well designed, because while you develop your character, while you become stronger, you will be able to face stronger opponents. Those opponents in the circumstance deck really are of a different level, and then you have the bosses. if you early try to attack a boss of level 7 or 8, you will be obliterated. But at some point, if you upgrade your character, if you upgrade your group parameters, you will be able to face him. Of course, we have to remember that finally it's the Dead King that matters. We have to prepare ourselves to destroy him. So we have to really upgrade all of our parameters. We cannot concentrate only on the attack parameter or only on the defense parameter, because at the end we will have to face the Dead King, which can target different parameters, who is very strong, who has a great attack value, who has a great endurance, who has a tremendous amount of energy reserve. So it's something that I really like, because you really have to evolve during the game, and you will feel that the level of difficulty is almost always a little bit higher than you think that you can manage, and that's great. Also, you can, if you think that the game is too easy, increase the difficulty level of opponents that you are facing, so you can, as I said earlier, tailor the game to your needs. What I really like also in this game is its climate, it's the theme. I believe it was a brilliant idea to add the storybook to the second edition. It's something that people who like to play role-playing games or mixes of board games and role-playing games will especially appreciate. It's something that makes the game even more interesting, because it receives additional depth, it receives additional theme, and I loved it. I loved to read the passages about the Bandit Prince, about the Cryovern, about the encounters. It's great. It's a great idea to include this in the second edition, and I believe it's one of the coolest things that changed from the first to the second edition. So, having said all those good things about HEXplore, the value of the Dead King, what I think are the weaker points of the system or of this game? Well, I would say there are 2 or 3 of them. The first one are the circumstance cards. I like the fact that we have a great diversity of those cards. We have some encounters, we have some items, we have some events. Some of them are unavoidable, and that's cool, that's great, because in my opinion it is quite easy to avoid those circumstance cards. The rules are written in such a way that while moving cautiously, so while moving one hex or while moving through a path or alongside a river, you can avoid a circumstance, and I believe it will happen very often. It very often happened in the games that I have played, so I believe it's a little bit too easy to avoid those circumstances. Maybe we should have a bigger number of cards which are unavoidable. Maybe we could avoid those circumstance cards only if we accomplish other conditions. I just felt it was too easy, and those circumstances really can hurt you. So it's I think it would be a good idea to augment the difficulty level, or to make those circumstances less easy to be avoided. The second thing which deserves to be mentioned, which can be a problem for certain players, is the number of dice rolling, and the bookkeeping in this game. Because firstly, you will roll a lot of dice, or really a lot of dice during explored games. You will roll navigation, you will roll during combat, you will roll to verify if there is a circumstance, what circumstance, you will roll to verify what you find in a shrine, etc, etc. It's all about dice rolling. You have different types of dice. Sometimes you will roll 2 of them, 3 of them, 1, a green one, a yellow one, and you will do it not occasionally, but each and every turn. Each player will roll the skills. He will do his skill checks. So I personally have no problem with this. I like dice games. I like even warriors. I like iron die, which is a collectible die game. So I'm keen on dice, but I know that some people have this problem and do not like games which in its core mechanics makes people to roll the dice constantly. And in HEXplore you will roll the dice constantly. Now the second aspect which might be a problem for certain people is the bookkeeping in this game, because as I said earlier, you really have to carefully check and control a lot of parameters. You have different skills, you have your health, you have your energy, which will constantly change. I can upgrade my attack skill, I have to erase, I have to write. I had 5 units of gold, now I have 7. I have to erase it, I have to write it. I lost 2 points of health because of circumstance cards. I have to erase it and write it once more. So you will constantly erase your stats, you will constantly write new parameters. And some people might find it too engaging, some people might find it really something which will take away the joy of playing, because if we have too many bookkeeping in a game, we might forget the game itself and concentrate on the bookkeeping. Now, I believe that in HEXplore this limit was not passed. The thin red line which says end of enjoyment, beginning of bookkeeping, in my opinion was not breached, and that's fine. But for some people it's a question of personal preference. This line can be a little bit closer, and in those cases HEXplore might seem like a bookkeeping adventure, and those people might feel that the game is made of dice rolling and bookkeeping, forgetting about the theme, forgetting about the climate. I am mentioning it because it is part of the game and you should know it before committing yourself and buying the game, because then if you do not know it, you might be disappointed. Now, the third thing that I would like also to mention is the fact that sometimes you will have quests which should be made on tiles which are absent from the game map. Because at first you draw 5 quests, and it happens that all those quests should be made on tiles which are not on the board. Now, I believe that's a problem, because to accomplish those quests you have to travel to the edge of the map, draw a new tile, and to get lucky to draw a tile where this quest is being located. Or you can buy additional tiles using gold, or you can buy the possibility of discarding some cards from the 5 slots which are currently available. So you have to spend gold in order to change the situation. I didn't like it because gold is such a precious thing that I would prefer to upgrade my stats, to buy additional equipment, than to discard cards. I used this only when I had really no other things to do and I wanted some interesting quests somewhere where I could accomplish them. Now, it's not a big thing, because you can always house rule that if among the 5 quests that are present, 3 or more are quests which cannot be accomplished because the tiles are absent, you can just discard them and draw new cards. It's not a problem, but I had this problem in the first edition. The thing still persists in the second one, and I still had this feeling, I really would like to have on at least 3 quests which are somewhere here nearer, or on tiles which I know where to go. Not a big thing, but I believe that this thing should be included, perhaps in the optional rules or somewhere in the rulebook. Having said that all, I believe that HEXplore is a truly fantastic adventure game. It's a game in which you will really greatly feel the theme, in which you will feel your character upgrade influences gameplay. A game in which the replayability, the different possibilities of developing your character are truly amazing. A game with fantastic components, a game in which you will roll a lot of dice, and a game which is, thanks to the storybook, something of a crossover of a board game and a role-playing game. I really like it. I like the universe, I like the system, and I can't wait to test the Forests of Adriman. Now, I will also show you the Return to the Valley of the Dead King, so the expansion through the Valley of the Dead King shortly, so stay tuned. I believe that the addition of additional elements which will enable us to play the Dead King will furthermore increase the options that we can set the game up and then play it. This was HEXplore It, the Return of the Valley of the HEXplore It, the Valley of the Dead King, a review of the second edition. Take a look at our other materials. We have some videos, we have some unboxings, top 10s and other stuff. I hope you will return to our YouTube channel shortly. Have a great day and see you next time.